Well, what I'm going to do is ask her, if she's up for it, to tell one or two stories from that experience and see if we can get that back to why we're doing this.
So clearly we're writing this talk as we're
Don't worry about it, it's fine.
Hi, I'm Sarah. So yeah, do you have stories in mind you want me to?
Maybe something about Lincoln's name and then the military vets.
The military vets, and what was the other one?
The guy my age.
Oh, Brett. Okay, so first of all, when I decided to do this project, I had virtually no exposure to the homeless community in Phoenix. So I just sort of showed up, like down at it's called the Human Services Campus in downtown Phoenix, where it has several different social service agencies all in the same place, so people can get shelter. They have a day center that people can get water and some air conditioning and charge their cell phones. There's a health clinic. So I just decided, like, I'll go start being homeless there. And so I showed up in the afternoon, and it's a strange place. I don't know if San Antonio has a place similar where that just kind of has a lot of people experiencing homelessness that congregate. But in Phoenix, it's like 102 degrees. Everybody's just sort of sitting around. There's not much to do. You know, people are sort of waiting to see a caseworker, and so they can start looking for a job or getting services or whatever. So there's just a lot of downtime where no one has anything to do. So, but it's just a huge amount of people, and I'm kind of shy. So I'm like, this is an alien environment to me. So I just sort of sat down, and the ground is weird. They have it all covered with astroturf, so it's like this fake grass with like cigarette butts in it, and like ants. It's awesome, really pretty. So I sat down, and I'm sweating, and I'm like anxious because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this was kind of a wild idea. And this young guy comes walking up to me. He's got a big smile on his face and just comes straight up to me, and he's like, "You're new here, huh?" And yes. And he's like, "All right, let me introduce you to some people. Like, young woman, you shouldn't be sitting out here by yourself." And he wasn't with the Human Services Campus. He was actually a guy experiencing homelessness himself. He'd been a Marine vet and was discharged because of his bipolar disorder, and was now homeless himself. So he introduced me to a bunch of women. He got me connected to a community. He showed me where to sleep, a safe place to sleep at night. And I chose not to use any shelter services while I was doing this project, right? Because I'm trying to raise money for shelters, and I didn't want to take a bed that somebody else had. So Brett was using the shelter, and I was sleeping in a parking lot. And I would trade him cigarettes for coffee in the morning, so I couldn't get coffee. That was actually one of the hardest things about the experience. But one of the things that is really hard for me about my friend Brett is that he was just screwed because he didn't have the right people around him at the time that he needed people. Like, he's a young, charismatic guy. He's a community builder, right? Like, he's experiencing homelessness, and he's building communities and taking care of people. But he's on the street because, unlike someone like Evan, who's actually the same age as the guy Brett that I met, very similar in personality too, right? Like, they're community builders. They love working with people. They like connecting people and taking care of people. But Evan has a great community around him. He grew up in a family that was never in need like that, and so if he hits hard times, like, he's got a phone call he can make, and Brett didn't have that phone call. And so part of why I think groups like this are so important is that you guys can be each other's phone calls. You know, like, part of what we're doing as a secular movement is building community so we can be family for each other, so we don't end up in that situation, and so that these beautiful people in the room around you don't end up in that situation. Again, so the whole experience, there's no difference between the people we see experiencing homelessness and the people we see in this room. Like, these are high quality people out there, and they just didn't have the support. So be the support for each other. Okay, second story. The shelter that I was raising money for was a women's veterans shelter that had a funding gap. So they needed about $50,000 to get them between grant periods, or they were going to have to close. And so I was trying to raise money for them. So they had a companion shelter that was the men's section, a men's veterans shelter, and I got to speak there one morning. told them that their sister shelter was in danger of closing. And so these are all guys experiencing homelessness themselves. They're in the shelter. And I talked about how the amount of money I chose to raise represented $2 for every person who'd experienced homelessness in Arizona that year. And I talked about wanting to make sure that these women had a place to stay and to get their lives back together. And the guys were really shocked that these women were about to lose their shelter. And the mood of the meeting was really intense. But as everybody was leaving and sort of thanking me for what I was doing, the first guy who came up to me reached in his pocket and pulled out $2. He's like, "Here's $2 for the year that I spent homeless." And then one by one, these guys, those are homeless guys, right? Like all of their pennies count, and they're pulling out all their change and handing it over to donate to their sisters to make sure they have a place to be. And I like to tell that story because we do a really terrible thing with people experiencing homelessness where we see them as other. They're not like us, and they've done something wrong. They're drunks, or and the people I met were so compassionate and loving, and they just had circumstances that were hard to overcome. So I'm gonna, collect myself.
Okay. So what I love about this story, this is one of my favorite activism stories, and that one specific is an incredible story. And why it's an inspiration for the project we're doing right now is because of the way it inspired her local community. So, we've all heard about the issue of homelessness, right? We've all probably passed panhandlers, we've all maybe even know people in our family or extended community, but we so rarely do anything about it. And what was fascinating was if you watched how Sarat did her project, she suddenly humanized a group of people that hadn't been humanized before. And so her family, her local atheist community, Arizona was getting news stories about it. And it was almost sad that they had to humanize it through her, a woman who has a house, had to sleep on the streets for us to humanize people experiencing homelessness. But there still was that element of we were humanizing a group of people that are so marginalized we usually don't humanize. Or even just humanizing the issue, not even the people sometimes. And so this past year, we've been working together for about 2 years now. We have we like to call it a humanist consulting firm. We consult political campaigns and nonprofits. We help them get publicity. And we started thinking about, are there ways we can humanize some of those issues out there that we're disconnected from? Can we humanize people or communities or ideas that we either just don't touch or ignore or demonize or irrationally avoid or not believe? And that's what inspired this podcast. So for the past 4 months, we've been traveling the country nonstop, living wherever we can, pretty much, interacting with or experiencing modern social issues. So using the inspiration of her project, we started looking at a ton of different issues and asking, how can we interact with them? How can we learn about them in an experiential way and then turn them into stories? And so if you check out our podcast, we have 5 episodes out right now. The first 2 episodes, one is about her story in Phoenix in 2013. The second one, we kind of ask the question, what is a humanist experience? But then we jump right into the experiences. And the 3 we've done so far, we visited a abortion clinic in Southern California and volunteered as patient escorts to understand the experience actually outside facilities when protesters are there. People trying to access their own healthcare and how toxic that environment is. We went to a nudist retreat in northern Arizona to challenge our own anxieties and irrational ideas around body image and anxiety and body positivity. What else did we do? Oh my God, we visited Middletown, California. It's about an hour north of Sacramento, California. And in October, half the town burned down. They had a wildfire that went through and wiped out 2,000 houses.
And it's a small one, 3,000 households.
Right.
So.
And so we, while walking around the town, kind of not knowing even what the story was, in a lot of ways being disaster tourists, which is its own weird conversation, we walked into an art center. And we started asking them about the art center, and the person mentioned, oh, we opened in May, we're a nonprofit, and all 6 board members lost their homes in October. And so we found this beautiful story about how art is now holding that community together. And we're trying to do this project for a year, so we're only 3.5 months in. We want to do this until October, I guess this year now, 2016. And yeah, so we've been asking this question of what are humanist experiences that we need to do in order for us to create stories so people can better understand an issue and look at it in a humanist lens. Yeah. So that's like the big, whirlwind of what we're doing. I think what I would love to do, if we have a few minutes, is I would love to, I would love to take any questions you have about what we've been doing, but I also want to fire back a few questions about what maybe the most humanist experience you've ever had is. An experience that radically updated your emotions or your worldview based on experience. And I would love if you have any suggestions for future things we can do. I love young minds much more than the older groups we speak to. So.
I like how you're sort of pointing at me.
I mean, so yeah, there you have it. It's the humanist experience. So I'll start, fine. Do you have any humanist experiences you can think of? What is maybe the most emotional experience you've had that has updated the way you've thought about something or the way you interacted with something?
Yeah, and maybe we should sort of define what we have been calling a humanist experience, because what we've been trying to do is marry reason and compassion in the way that we interact in the world, and we understand that to be the most humanist way of interacting with the world, right? That we're using our minds, but we're also still rooted in compassion, and it's a naturalistic way of thinking about the world and feeling about the world. And so our definition of a humanist experience is an experience that educates your emotions and updates your worldview. So it's both an intellectual experience where you think differently, but it happens through a feeling or experience.
Yeah. So yeah, can you think of the most humanist or a very humanist experience you've ever had? Yeah.
I do have one experience. I'm half black. My hair is not fully grown out. It's not really obvious. The rest of my family, it's much more obvious on them. So I kind of live in a world where I get about half of the negative societal treatment from it, but not to any degree that the rest of my family does. So I'm not sure if this really qualifies, but there was one time a while back when I was younger, I was at the mall, and cops started coming through. There's something going on about a mile down, and they were, and this was a very, this is not representative of a very normal experience. This is a very bizarre one-time thing, but they started, they formed a wall, started going through, and all of the lighter-skinned people stayed behind, and they started pushing in everyone with remotely, it was really bad. They started basically telling anyone with darker skin, specifically black people, to leave. So it was very weird. It was me, my stepbrother, and we were surrounded by a shell of white friends. Yeah, well, my stepbrother was black, fully black. So was the rest of my biological family, but yeah. So no, they went directly through the shell, looked me and my brother in the face, told us, get the fuck out of here. At which point, having I suppose the lighter skin privilege that I experienced my life in at that point, I looked at him, scoffed, and then walked right into Paxo. So my stepbrother and my other friends, they all followed me. And what do? I'm the leader of this. I'm the one who, if they have anything against, they should do something about. They walked halfway through the group, did not do anything to me, grabbed my stepbrother, and pinned him against the wall. So they pinned him against the wall. There was 2 security officers. I'm standing there not knowing what the hell's going on. I'm trying to, I mean, and my mom had already somewhat prepared me for this, so I was like, I'm sorry, man, like, dude, just take it. At which point, 3 other security officers come, he's completely subdued, and say, do you need help with him? They said, yes. One of them pulls out a taser and points it directly at his head and says, I will fucking tase you, stop resisting. At which he's saying, I'm not resisting, screaming, I'm not resisting. Not really sure exactly how this story is going to wrap up. Long story short, they pushed me down for several times, but the one who ended up getting dragged off was my stepbrother. I didn't know where he was for a few hours, called my mom. She was like prepared for that. She's been preparing for this day like just forever. She got her white friends as representatives, essentially, as witnesses, drove up there, got her white friends to represent her, and talked to the cops until they took him out, fully admitted that they do know that he did not do anything wrong at all, but still banned him from the mall for a year without explanation, and did not apologize. I was young, we were both young, we were sobbing at this point.
So let me ask you, how did that educate your emotions?
At that point, I didn't know exactly, I understood that there were issues going on, racial issues, tension, or mistreatment of different races and ethnicities. But at that point, I finally really sunk in. I know that was an extreme example. It wasn't something that happens that often, probably, but
Right.
that was a situation where not only did I kind of realize that to a small degree, I'm going to have to live with that, but even to a much, much higher degree, like my family members and everyone else who did not come out looking the way that I look
Right.
are going to have to experience that to an even higher degree. So I would say that kind of opened my eyes to how crappy things are.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. Here, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You can go ahead.
No, I was gonna give another example if that would help people, but.
Okay, well, prior to coming to UTSA back in Houston, I was a musician who played with cover bands from the age of 13, and I played every weekend. And so it was kind of like my job, but and I played with my father. So the band he was in the 90s, which was another pretty prominent cover band around our area, asked me and him to travel with them to Tennessee to play for a camp of kids with kidney failure. So we went to Tennessee and we played for them in their camp. It was a really cool camp. It was a summer camp for the kids to go to, so their parents could pretty much, get like a little break, 2-week break from, having to take the kids to dialysis and all this other stuff, and to give the kids, an opportunity to have some fun with their peers. And so we played the show for them. It was like 2 hours, and we got them on stage jumping and dancing around, and they're having a lot of fun and laughing and running around. And at the end of the night, the kids all went back with their mentors or whatever, back to their beds and whatnot. And the group, or the camp leaders, were all with the band hanging out. They were just drinking and everything. And then one of the leader of the entire camp told us that most of those kids won't survive till next summer. Like they were there because this was it for them. So after hearing that, it really hit me, because it made me realize just how important it could be just to make someone smile, because life is so fragile, and it really made me change the way I thought just about giving someone a reason to smile, no matter what it is. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I think what both of your stories have in common is that you both learned things that you already knew intellectually, right? Like, life is short. Like, that's a fact. We all know that fact. And there's racial issues in our country. That's not a secret to anybody. But how we start to care about them and understand the urgency that people place on some of these social issues, like, why is Black Lives Matter so angry, Well, when you have an experience like that, you understand why they're so angry. And, when we talk about end-of-life issues, or we talk about some of these diseases that are affecting children and communities, like, it's more poignant, and it makes our, I know when I did hospice work, like, that made my, life more vibrant to me. And that's, again, like, we all know life is short, but how do you realize it? And it's through experience, I think, that we realize the things we know.
Someone want to fill in?
Alright. My second semester in college it was at a different college, but it was pretty rocky. It was spring of 2013. I had come to the realization that I was only Christian by title because that was the only connection I had to my immediate family. Otherwise, we were fundamentally different on various things. And once I finally renounced that title as well, it was both liberating and devastating, and it caused me to be very lethargic. And, my skepticism was pretty palpable the years prior, and that led to a lot of underlying tension in my family. But after that, it descended. And eventually, I actually got kicked out. I never came out to my parents as an atheist, and I still haven't to this day. But I know why I got kicked out, or because I wasn't, I wasn't reflective of what my parents' ideal was. And I remember the night that I got kicked out, they were basically telling me, your network of strength, your security blanket, the people you can fall back on, it's basically gone. If you're not living with us, that means, you're not going to church with us and you don't have any friends, anyone to lean back on. I am going to be so surprised if you actually make it through this semester and graduate. Good luck. Haha, good fucking luck. And, for years beforehand, there was a lot of fear-mongering that went on that, people outside the church are going to try to cheat you and swindle you in any way possible. With being kicked out, you're kind of homeless for a bit. And I remember the first few days being very scared and very hungry. I received a lot of kindness from people who, weren't open about their religious orientation or lack thereof. I met up with some people that I barely spoke to in high school that went to the same university as me, and they offered me a place to live, and they even set me up with a job. But even before that, I remember, those first few hungry days, I remember just mentioning in passing in one of my classes that, oh man, like, I haven't eaten in a while. I actually got kicked out, and this girl in my class who barely spoke to me, she was just like, hey, come hang out with me after class. And I remember her taking me to a supermarket and just being like, all right, so what do you need? And I was so scared. I was just like, oh, what do I get? And she was just like, whatever you want. She ended up buying me like $50 worth of groceries, to help make sure that my physical needs were met so that I could worry about other things. And there are other examples of how people demonstrated their kindness to me when they were helping me get my crap together and be a self-sufficient person. And I flourished. I did pretty okay. And any fear or doubt I had about not receiving any help or being screwed over by complete strangers just totally dissipated. And from that I learned that sometimes complete strangers tend to be more compassionate than people who are your flesh and blood.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to tell one story and then we can
wrap this up. And this was one I had when I was in my Secular Student Alliance. So I started at California Lutheran University. It's a religious school. I don't know if you can tell. And so much like your group, we were not antagonistic at all. We wouldn't exist if we were an antagonistic group. But what we did do was we really actively participated in interfaith. I would say we were extremely active in interfaith to the point where most Sundays we went to church or synagogue or mosque. That was like what we did. We're like, you know what? If we have a strong opinion about our belief, we at least should understand other people's, and so we decided we're going to go. And this was really exciting for the campus, at least, because they like to talk about religious diversity. So all of these Christian groups started joining us, and it was fun, actually. I went to pagan rituals, I went to Islamic mosques, I went to Hindu temples. But one experience will stick with me the rest of my life, and I think you all will relate to it a bit because you're SSA students, and to me, it's the reason I am so actively involved in communities fighting for a more rational world. But we decided to go to a local Black Baptist church in Simi Valley, California. So this is about an hour outside of Los Angeles. And I've never been to any type of Baptist before. And I grew up like Massachusetts Catholic, right? It's about as boring as it can get. And we went with a local Lutheran group on campus, which most of them had never been to a Baptist church either. And you get in and it's like straight out of a Hollywood movie, right? The singing, the dancing, the hats. It's beautiful. People are completely dressed up. I don't know, it's like the stereotypes, right? But like, I couldn't believe I just walked into this. Like, this is the most exciting church I've ever been in my life. And I'm thinking, like, church, like an hour maybe, right? This was a 3-hour service. And I remember vividly it was 3 hours because I skipped breakfast that morning. I was dying. But forgetting that for a second, the first hour is all singing and dancing, right? You've got the choir, you've got the pastor up there, everyone with their fans, right? And having a blast, right? I've never enjoyed church so much before. And then the second hour, the pastor does like kind of a big sermon. It's very boisterous. It's kind of what you would expect the pastor to do in a situation like that. But the third hour, I'd never seen before. And this, what he asked this congregation to do, and it's maybe 150, maybe 250 people. He asked people to come up to the front and ask questions to God that he then would answer. And so these were, at first, simple questions, right? Like, I don't remember the first one, but it's like, my family's going through struggles, will God help us? Yes, God will help you. I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem too bad. Then a couple comes up, and they go, we're trying to have a baby. And we've been trying really hard for months now, but we can't seem to have a baby. Will God help us have a baby? And he goes, look around this room. Multiple people have asked this question, and I've helped, God's helped bring babies to these families. God will help you have a baby. And I'm like, okay, but whatever. It doesn't seem that harmful, right? But this last one, a woman comes up. She must be in her, I want to say, she looks older, but probably 40s, late 40s or something. And she comes up and she goes, my son has leukemia. And so her son, she said her son got really bad, got really sick a year ago. And they took him to the hospital and he just barely survived, but the doctors saved him. But he's sick again. And I'm curious if God will save my son, because I don't trust the doctors anymore. Will God save my son? He walks up, puts his hand on her shoulder, and he says, don't worry, God will save your son. And for me, I've never been able to erase that from my mind, this idea that I used to be a very much like live and let live person, but you can't be after that. Like, if she follows his word, he could die. If he's under 18, he has no choice necessarily in what happens. So to me, there's a value in speaking up and being part and building communities that care about science and rationality and changing the world. So that was a humanist experience for me. Anyways, we're gonna hang out for a while till you guys end the meeting, or I think we're around for like 2 days. If you have any awesome humanist experience ideas for us, we're looking for things. We know we're creating artificial experiences, right? Like she wasn't actually experiencing homelessness when she
No,
slept in the
I
street.
could, when I started getting heat exhaustion, I called up my friend to come pick me up in his air-conditioned car and went to the hospital with my Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance. Like, this is not being homeless
Right.
for real.
And all of these experiences we're doing, you know, we're not taking on the identities of these people or these communities, but what we're trying to do is understand as much as we can and then turn those into stories so that more people can understand. And if you can think of things that can update our emotions or educate our worldviews, we would love them. Yeah.
You also try to go to Flint where the water's really bad and
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
want to.
that's on the
Yeah.
list.
I mean, just Detroit is on our list.
Well, yes, all of Detroit.
All of Detroit.
Yeah, well, we've talked about maybe squatting in a house in Detroit. There's,
Yeah.
food deserts
We have a few
there.
things we've been talking about doing. So I don't know if you know, but 20 million, 24 million? I think it's about 20 million Americans live within food deserts,
Oh,
which,
yeah.
which means they're with, you know, certain distance away from fresh food. So especially if you're low income and you live more than a few miles away from fresh food, you probably take public transportation. You're probably eating McDonald's or whatever's at your local gas station. So we were thinking of living on a food desert diet for a few weeks, try to understand that. We were looking at possibly, house squatting in Detroit. We're gonna go to a town in Southern California that already ran out of water and try to live with those people and see what it's like to live in America with no water. So yeah, if you have things that you can think of, you don't have to come up with them right now. We'll be around our email, we have Facebook, Twitter.
Humanistexperience.com is our website. That's where the podcast is. You can contact us through there.
Yep. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
I have a question about your story. Do you ever know the update on the guy, the child? Like, did you ever find out if he ended up living or if he died?
No, at the Baptist church. No, I didn't follow up. It just like stuck in my memory, but I didn't really, I was very hungry, and so, but that's a great question. I don't actually know what happened. I mean, my hopeful, optimistic assumption are that when push comes to shove, you do turn to doctors. But we do live in a world, actually we live in a country where about 3 or 4 times a year, parents don't give their kids medicine and they die.
Oh,
so.
it's far more than that.
Is
I
it?
actually lobbied
Oh.
on this because Arizona has good laws, actually, around this issue where you have to provide medical care for your kids. But states that don't have that, but yeah, the
Is it that high?
yeah,
Okay.
there are dozens of deaths per state. Yeah,
Well,
it's bad.
thank you.
Alright.
Let's see if this thing lost on me. Sure did. All right. Yeah, you can go. Okay, so